Good morning, everybody. Let's make sure everything is working. Hope everyone's doing well. Good morning, wherever you are. Thanks for joining me so early, as always. Eventually, I'll be, moving the time frame and recording the shows. So, put them up probably midday. But that's beyond the point. I think everything's working. Everyone hear me okay? Okay. Let's make sure we can see everything in the comments. Yeah, so episode 6, Utah. One of my favorite places in the world. My wife is from Utah. She still has a ton of family there. I've been there quite a few times. Easy place to fall in love with. It's just it has a magical feel about it. Um, wandering the southern part of the state, it just leaves a lot to the imagination. And even if you don't come to um, the conclusions that I may, you can still just feel something really crazy. It's hard to describe. If you haven't been there before, I strongly recommend um, visiting. Just about any part of Utah is beautiful. The southern part is probably my favorite, but but yeah. So another classic example of way too much information to squeeze into 90 minutes here. So I tried to um, pick my favorites as I do with most of these episodes. I've been really enjoying making shorts and adding a few things in separate shorter videos after the fact. So throughout the week, I'll be, maybe recording some articles that I left out or condensing some other ones with perhaps a little bit more in-depth explanation. But so yeah, stay tuned throughout the week. I'll keep uploading little tidbits about Utah. And also today after the show, I'll be posting the poll. So the poll is going to be Colorado and Nevada. I don't want to skip over Nevada. So it's going to be in the poll again. I have a strong feeling that unfortunately for Nevada, Colorado's going to win. And then I'm going to give probably one more week of voting between New Mexico and Nevada. And if Nevada loses out again, I'm just going to do Nevada because it's important and has a similar contextual feel to the Four Corners area in California and Oregon, even. The Oregon Territory was Nevada for a very long time, and a lot of my material on Oregon overlapped in Nevada, so I was kind of having to carefully choose what I posted. And there's some incredible stuff there. So yeah, stay tuned today. YouTube poll, Twitter poll. Colorado, Nevada. Yeah, that's going to be an amazing one. And again, thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it. Means a lot to me. And yeah, this is going to be a fantastic episode. Utah is an incredible place. I'm going to get my screen share going here. So, how's everybody doing, huh? I had some comments last time that I was quiet. I feel like my microphone's pretty good. So if I'm quiet, please let me know in the chat. Don't think I'm quiet, but perhaps that was just that person looking. Yep. Bernie, thanks for being here. Sherry, Gerald, Nicholas. His picks were Shepu Suki. Yeah. Yeah, we're going to be covering, the entire Southwest is a land rot of destruction. Hopefully you've seen my other episodes. That's definitely going to help. Arizona is going to have a ton of overlap here today. So we've covered that every Arizona city is built on top of an ancient city that goes 3, 4, 5 stories below the city. Um, Not only that, you're dealing with a region that was almost completely covered with cities, canals. Um, yeah, that trend is going to continue. So it's an important note to make. But yeah, so episode 6, Utah. We'll just kind of get into things here and just look at some pictures and kind of take our time as people get into chat here. Just to give you an idea, for those of you that have never been to Salt Lake City, here, let's go full screen so everyone can see this a little bit better. That's not helping. Just enough. Okay. Salt Lake is a very strange place. It's an amazing place, but it's very strange. I've never been to a city laid out like Salt Lake, and it has all of the overlays of an oddly advanced and unlike any other place. The city streets, like you look at the city in from this picture, and you're like, that looks like a normal city. Well, these streets are 3 or 4 times as wide as any city, and they're an 8 lane road, 8 lanes. And when you're in the city, even on a busy weekday, it feels like a ghost town. Feels like a very small city, or very like no one's there. Um, it's like they designed now that the streets were this wide in the 1850s. It's like, you'll see some images of, a horse and carriage in a street that is 100 feet wide. It's very odd. It's like they were designing the city for 2050 or later, because even now there's not enough traffic to really justify the large cities. It's really quite nice because there's never congestion. You know, I mean, coming from a small city like Portland that was poorly designed, and the roads can barely fit a car going each way, let alone people walking. Um, Obviously, it's not quite as bad as some European cities, but this place is just very strange, and it's quite beautiful. You can see um, mountain ranges, and then you have the Salt Lake there in the top left, or the Dead Sea. That's what they called it in the 1850s. And that's an important note to remember, that they called it the Dead Sea. That was even as a tourist attraction, it was labeled the Dead Sea. Now, super interesting. Remember that Dead Sea. So here's the temple. It's one of the most beautiful buildings I've ever seen. Um, and I forgot to do this. So I want to show you the inside of the tabernacle. Let's. My apologies. I should have had this. Should have had this picture ready, but man, it's so annoying that they have to click around like this. Um, this is the largest organ by weight. It's not the largest organ by amount of tones, but it's the largest organ by size. The interior of the tabernacle is just one giant large room. Um, on holidays, hey Sherry, thanks for being here. Yes, it is early. Yeah. So again, I will be recording these shows in the future and just doing live premieres. I do enjoy the live chat, but I'm horrible at paying attention to the live chat, and it's super early. I feel like it would benefit everybody and the show um, by having it a little bit later. So we'll get there. I'm still enjoying doing it in the mornings here, but yeah. So this is the organ inside the tabernacle. Um, I wish there were some people here. I could have got a better picture. Let's just go find a better picture. It's one of the most beautiful places That's a horrible small picture. But there's people in this one. Look at this. There's a person here. And when they have this whole thing filled and they're singing, it is, it makes the hair stand up. It's unbelievable. Even when there's only like the front pew here filled with people, like when the children are singing, oh man, it makes you like want to cry. It's absolutely insane. They'll have a full orchestra, they'll have the organ going, and the sound is unbelievable. Um, it's a beautiful thing, you know. And again, for those who don't know, my wife is Mormon. I'm not, but my wife is, and it's very special to me, and obviously to her. You know, make of what you will of any religion. Um, you have to, you know, get the meat and spit out the bones, and find the golden threads. And you know, as Jesus says, everything is parables, and you have to read between the lines. But for me, I have never had a bad experience, and all of the people I've ever met have been nothing but amazing and fantastic. And even as an outsider, you know, a Gentile, um, the love I feel from these people is incredible, and that's what means the most to me. I'm sure there are people that have different feelings about it all, and that's okay. I want everyone to not feel any judgment, you know, and you shouldn't be putting out your judgment either. But yeah, this is one of my favorite places in the world, you know, and I'm covered in tattoos head to toe. And my wife's family has been a part of the church for a very long time, and they go very, very, very far back in the church before the, you know, before the so-called wagon trains. And um, I stand out like a sore thumb. So, you know, I felt very distant, and you know, but now it's been you know a decade or more, and you don't feel that way anymore. But anyways, their history is incredible. The building is incredible. So yeah, I just wanted everyone to see the tabernacle, and we'll hop back onto the other stream. That was worth showing for sure. Just incredible, incredible organ and an incredible building. That's the tabernacle here that I was showing. Um, yeah, and the temple. It's important also, you know, as I talk about things being buried. Um, it's obviously this building goes far below the ground level. And the first picture I showed, you got the Salt Lake here in the background, right? And Salt Lake City. Here's the Salt Lake that I showed you in the background. City's right here. And then Utah Lake, or the Sea of Galilee. Okay, remember these names. Okay, the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea. This is called the Dead Sea. This is how it was advertised, and still today, if you look it up and type it in, you'll get search results. You got the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River. This is the real names of these. What is your theory on the organ? Well, the organ, and it's a healing. That's why it's called an organ. Um, just like tuning forks, um, the body resonates, and the organs of the body resonate. Yeah, health device, absolutely. Portal, I wouldn't go that far. If anything's a portal, I'd say large bells. Large bells could make things disappear. Metallic, just the person I want to be here. We're getting into the juice. Metallic is stuff that's going to resonate here with you. But yeah, the organ is an important feature, especially when you get a whole room together of people. The power of prayer um, is an incredible thing, and then you get everyone's frequency matching, and then you use the organ to amplify. Um, but yeah, so remember these, okay? Salt Lake City, the Dead Sea, or the Salt Sea, and then the Sea of Galilee, or Utah Lake. Ruins and Egyptian hieroglyphics have been found all around Utah Lake and all around the Great Salt Lake, or the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee. This is the Great Saltaire Pavilion, lying in the middle of the Dead Sea. Quite an amazing building. It's been burnt down twice. It's been repainted several different color themes. I just got back from Utah, Hawk Zion. Beautiful. That's awesome, Dean. Yeah. Two of my favorite places. Yeah. Um, yeah, and we'll show some more pictures of the Saltaire here, but um, you know, obvious Moorish, minarets, Moorish design. It's an important feature to remember as we move on here. Here are the first 6 temples uh, of the LDS faith: Kirtland, Nauvoo, St. George, Logan, Manti, and Salt Lake. In this post, I go on to talk about these 5 here have all very, very distinct architectural markers. And after these 5 temples, they never looked this way again. They were never built this way again. Um, Everything about the structure changed. And I think this is an important feature to remember. Um, Kirtland, we're going to leave out of this. Nauvoo, even, is not so similar. But Logan, Manti, Salt Lake, and St. George. I just want you guys to remember these 4. Um, I've established the opinion, my opinion, I apologize, that these 4 here were already here. And we're already in Salt Lake, pre-1850 is what I mean by already here. Sorry. And their construction is shrouded in mystery. You can find a lot of construction photos, but we might dive into some of those. There's a lot of anomalies. The Salt Lake being one of the best examples because there are the most pictures of it being, put together. But the problem with a lot of them is when you find the lowest foundational images, um, they're building on ground level, right? So it's like, okay, here's the foundation. We're about 8 feet up. Well, the problem is when they started doing renovations in the 1980s, 1990s, they went down 60 feet. So when you are talking about, construction and breaking ground and so forth and setting foundations, you're not going to be setting stones on dirt when the foundation goes 60 feet down. And those pictures do not exist. And that's common with a lot of these monsters. But one of my favorite here's the outside of Nauvoo Temple in metallic. This should look familiar to you. Joseph Smith and his golden tablets that were closely related to the Micmac language, incredible Egyptian iconography and overlays. You find a lot of those symbols here on Nauvoo Temple. I just want to leave this image up so people can take a screenshot, or again, this is all going to be in the thread. So if you want to dig on this stuff later, that's no problem. There were rumors in the late 1800s that these buildings had swastikas all over them. The LDS Temple, the Nauvoo Temple, the Logan Temple. There's tons of um, uh, um, Big Dipper overlays, and the Big Dipper, its transitory migration in the sky, the 404 quadrants, creating the swastika in the sky. That's a overlay that exists in so many cultures across the world. And yeah, the golden tablets is incredibly interesting. They were translated with a seer's stone, almost identical to the story of John Dee and the Enochian tablets. Again, I'm not going to get into too much of that here, but there are fantastic authors out there that have already written quite in depth about it. But yeah, the golden tablets, Micmac language, which is incredibly similar to Egyptian. And as we've already discussed throughout California, Arizona, Egyptian iconography, hieroglyphics, buried cities, buried people, people still alive, all over the place, and I just showed you that image of the Salt Lake with the Jordan River, the Dead Sea, and the Sea of Galilee. Um, Now that's going to be a hard kind of thing to interpret and understand, but these names existed before. Later on, we're going to get into that. These names were here already. Um, the Mormons were a ancient group, not the more recent group that you can think of. And Metallic knows what I'm talking about. And hopefully, by the end of this, you guys will be closer to understanding that. But this iconography is really important. It's all over those first 5 temples. The first 5 temples. After this stuff doesn't appear on the temples at all. They become white marble. They look totally different. They're still incredibly geometric, but they have none of this iconography. It's gone after this. So yeah, like I was talking about, we're going to get into this here in a second. So I don't want to go too far, but remember the lodestone, remember the Mecca. Okay. Anyone that's followed my work before will know I talk about this ad nauseum sometimes. I get pretty obsessed with it. We're going to go over some older images here. California as an island. Why is this important? Well, this is important because the earliest histories of the Salt Lake, the Dead Sea, were connected with the ocean. It was an ocean-going sea. And the maps, again, anyone that's been in this kind of so-called Tartaria community, whatever you want to call it, I tend to steer away from that. But you've looked at enough maps, I hope. And the maps all change. California shifts a lot. Between the 1500s and the 1800s, California is an island, is not an island, is an island, is not an island. Well, it at one point it's straight or a break extended far up, the Sea of Cortez or whatever you want to call it, and it was called the Vermilion Sea or the Red Sea. Now these names are important, right? We're dealing with the Dead Sea, the Sea of Galilee, the River Jordan, okay, the Vermilion Sea, the Red Sea, okay. Now, we're gonna get into Deuteronomy a little bit. We're gonna go over some Bible verse and show you why Moses may have left California and found his way into Utah. Is that possible? Well, we're gonna go over some stuff that's gonna make that seem incredibly possible. Not only possible, but plausible. Here we are again. California is no longer an island, but we have, again, labeled the same. The Gulf of Red, the Vermilion Gulf, the Red Sea. Now, why is it called that? Well, the algae blooms there every year create a reddish color in the water. Here is the Salt Lake connected to the Red Sea. Now, septum. This is called the 7 cities. Cibola, 7 cities of gold. Okay. Ciula on the Salt Lake here. Okay. Before it was closed off and became a Dead Sea. It was connected to the ocean. I love this one too. You got Lake Conibas and Lago de Conibas. This was called a Dead Sea at one point as well. And guess what? So was Tenochtitlan. Tenochtitlan was called a Dead Sea. It was a salt sea in the middle of the inland, and it had an Atlantean feel to it. Le Conibas de Lago, same thing. It had an island with a massive city in the middle, a ring city with canals and bridges going off in all directions. The Salt Lake or the Dead Sea, same thing. There have been ruins found all throughout the salt. They've been incredibly deteriorated. And they found giant open pits inside this lake that feed into some underground subterranean lake that they say that could be as large as the whole state of Utah. It's so big. They haven't been able to even map the extent of it, which is a common narrative we keep coming back to. Subterranean realms, subterranean rivers, streams, oceans. Here's an older picture. Here's the 7 cities down here. I apologize for the smaller quality. Some of these maps, it's hard to get good high res here, okay? But here's Lake Conibas again, okay? With the island, with the huge castle. Here down here we have again the Septum, the city of 7, the 7 cities on the lake. Over here you have Chicago, Huchilaga before the Great Lakes were even in existence, but you can see the outline, Shilaga. Now, Shilaga used to be called the Great White City, and the capital of Katai was the Great White City. And I postulated on old maps that this region is called Katai, and that this was the original Katai before some incredible event. And they rebranded and moved, and Chicago was the capital. Here's another picture of the Saltaire after some additions. The windows here weren't in the original picture. The minarets, the colors changed. You know, it was a brown with a red. Now it's a white with a green. This has happened more than once, but just an incredibly beautiful place. I don't want to get into that yet. Okay, so let's go back. Actually, I wasn't going to do this, but I'm just going to do this now. Okay, so we showed the Dead Sea, we showed the Jordan River, we showed the Sea of Galilee, right? And now we're going to talk about what they were saying about Salt Lake. And this is an incredible article. It's the only one I've ever found like this. So it wasn't something talked about very much. By the Jordan Banks, Utah 1891, the great pilgrimage to Mecca in Salt Lake City, the nobles of Zion, okay, just like Zion National Park. And we're going to get into this. We're going to hop on some Google Earth here and we're going to type in some biblical verses and see where it takes us. Hitched their camels to the wall of the temple, the Salt Lake Temple, the oasis beside the Jordan, kissed the black stone, land of milk and honey, most exclusive in the world. By the banks of the Jordan, the sheiks of El Jebel camp in Fair Zion. El Jebel is a Shriner's temple in Colorado. And these men are making a pilgrimage from all over America, but this article is describing that specific group. From Mecca they hail and cover their heads with fez and moisten their lips with fizz. The special train conveying the... So I did a short video on this, and if you've seen it already, I apologize. And if you haven't, then perfect. But if you have, I'll try to breeze through this. But it's important to this, this whole show here. The special train conveying the nobility of El Jebel Temple, Denver, arrived in the city yesterday morning, and the sheiks pitched their tents at the Hotel Knutsford. Potentate Ephraim Bishop of El Jebel Temple, with a number of nobles of Zion, joined the pilgrims at Provo, where a sumptuous feast and many hospitalities were extended to the visitors during their brief stay. On arriving at Zion, these pilgrims shook off the dust from their sandals and sat down to the refreshments prepared by host Holmes. The afternoon was spent in an as-you-go-please style, the sheiks hitching their camels about the walls of the great temple. These men rode in a huge line on camels from Colorado to Salt Lake. Squatting on the ground, exchanged many strange stories to their pilgrimage across the desert to the oasis beside the Jordan. And that's not a small hike. That's a pretty large journey. Others were seen writing about the city. Now, this is important. Okay, this is from 1871. Others were seen writing about the city in the modern vehicles, which caused the derisive infidels to exclaim, "Who be those strange men in the little red caps?" Now, if you see any Shriner goings on nowadays, they ride in these little cars. They look like go-karts. But these people are driving modern vehicles in 1871. So these men are riding camels through the desert to Mecca. They call Salt Lake City Mecca, the most exclusive place in the world. They are kissing a black stone in the temple, and they're driving around modern vehicles. A lot of weird things to digest in this one, which made the men of noble lineage smile at this jeering of the emblem of the Kaaba. while they uncovered their heads of the Turkish fez and kissed the ensign of the black stone. At 5:30 o'clock, the pilgrims sat down to an all-dressed dinner, the flavor of which was delightful to their nostrils, and they ate it with zest and rejoiced greatly that in the oasis they found a land of milk and honey, with liquids that sparkled and fizz, making all the nobles dance in joyful ecstasy. At 7:30, Potentate S.A. Shepherd proceeded with his nobles to the Masonic Hall, where a large class of novices were initiated into the mysteries of the shrine. The class included some 40 persons from Salt Lake, Ogden, Evanston, Pocatello, Haley, Butte, and Helena. Potentate S.H. Shepherd, who was introduced to the Herald Scribe by Dr. Houghton himself, high in the council, kindly imparted some of his strange history of the mysterious order. It was said that the potentate in the time that in the past that Billy Florence, while at the foot of Mount Sinai, was confronted by an Arab chief and authorized to establish a temple in New York City, which he was to call Mecca, to which all pilgrims should go. The shrine was established in 1876 and later on the Lua in the city of brotherly love. And so great was the favor in which they were held that the cities were established in all leading cities on the coast. The Kaaba originates from the original Kaaba temples, which in the inner temple of the great Mecca temple, the Sanctum Sanctorum, pilgrims kiss the Kaaba stone, which with great reverence, and its miraculous effects are some of the mysteries of the shrine. So the mysteries of the shrine are the lodestone. I've talked about that a lot, and I intend on doing a pretty in-depth dive video on the subject, so people have a reference to go back to. But if you haven't seen my work with Dr. Longo, I talk about it pretty endlessly. But the stone was worshipped in a previous historical epoch. Humans had the voice of God within. They didn't have the analog eye, or the interior self, the self dialogue, the subconscious mind. That when you can have dialogue inside of your mind, that didn't exist. They literally had auditory hallucinations, like schizophrenia, and some evolutionary epoch or cataclysm, something along those lines happened, and the voice of God was lost, and people were trying to find it, and so they started worshiping idols, and these idols, stones, carved idols, statues, they became the voice of God. In the East, this was known as ancestor worship. Um, they would bury their dead, and the more dead you had buried in a specific area, you could hear them. You could literally hear your dead ancestors. Um, yeah, interesting thing to think about. So the Shriners, this is part of what they're keeping secret. Probably this destructionary age, as well as the loss of the voice of God and the creation of the bicameral mind, the analog eye, the subconscious and the conscious conjoining into one physical form. The Kaaba stone is of a black formation located in the northeast corner of the temple. Mound, but Mohammedans are admitted to the inner temple, which contains 400 pillars built of precious stone. The order had its greatest growth during the imperial pontiffs of San Briggs of Cleveland, Ohio. At the Knights Templar Conclave at Washington, there were 4,000 Shriners. And Potentate Shepherd predicts that no less than 10,000 will visit Denver during the conclave of 1898. None but 32-degree Masons or Knights Templars can join the order, making it the most select and exclusive secret order in the world. The El Jabal Temple was the outgrowth of the ISIS at Salina, Kansas. Okay, Salina, Kansas, the ISIS temple at Salina, Kansas. I'm not going to go too far down that rabbit hole because it'll take up a big chunk of the show, but for those of you that want to dig farther, it's incredibly important. We're going to go back to some articles a little bit later that'll show the connection between Salina, Kansas, and it was the Mormons in Salina, Kansas, who were a big part of the temple of the El Jabal Temple. Also, and again, we're talking about Mormons. Okay, there were different groups of Mormons. Salina, Kansas is a big thing to remember that name. If you want to dig into the temple there, it's still there. Salina, Kansas. It was called the Temple of Isis. So you have people taking a pilgrimage to what they called Mecca in Salt Lake, the nobles of Zion. Okay, and we were just talking about the biblical overlays with Salt Lake City. and why that is. And there's no coincidence, I promise you. I already showed some of this here. Let's get back to the thread. We're going to go to my one about the definitions here. The name Utah, Ohio, 1875. It was an Indian word derived from the speech of an Aboriginal tribe. The word Utah is of Egyptian origin, belongs to the hieroglyphic characters of ancient speech, signifies the eye, sacred in the name of Osiris, sun, source of light. The query propounded by our inquiring correspondent is not an uncommon one. Many persons have put the same question to their own minds, and the suppositions have been that it was an Indian word derived from the speech of an Aboriginal tribe of that region now known as Utah. But the word Utah is of Egyptian origin. Now, Utah, again, I'm not going to go too far into the phonetics. I have tons of threads on this, and I've covered it before. But Utah, Utah, Ute, Y, U, J's, Utah. In not only Egyptian, Phoenician, but several different Hebraic dialects that existed amongst the Indians. Utah was Judah. Okay. And after this episode, I might repost some of these articles, but lions, African lions, were still alive and being hunted in Arizona and Utah. Lions existed. The oldest lion skeletons exist here in America. The oldest lions. Lions originated here in America. The Lion of Judah, the Dead Sea, the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River. These Shriners are making their pilgrimage to Mecca, which is Salt Lake City. The word Utah is of Egyptian origin and belongs to the hieroglyphic characters of the most ancient speech, and from thence it was engrafted upon the Aramaic. Okay, the Aramaic. We're going to come back to the Mohammedans of Utah. The Aramaic, the Canaanite, or the Phoenician dialects. Yeah, really important. We've been talking about the Phoenicians. They were visiting California, not visiting, I would say running the show. So it was to the Aramaic, the Canaanite, and the Phoenician, as well as the Egyptian. We've covered Egyptian temples all over California and all over Arizona. We're going to cover a few more here. The dialects, and through them were introduced into the Hebrew. Right. Introduced into the Hebrew. Hebrew came last. Now, again, why it's important to, follow what I do on Twitter. I've posted for years. That's one of my oldest posts, is talking about the Sephardic element of the Hebraic, the block Hebrew that existed amongst the Indians. Not only that, but some of the Mohammedan, Aramaic, and Hebraic, or Jewish tendencies and language that these Indians shared. It's not a deniable element. The Mormons said the Indians of the Southwest were Hebraic, were Hebrews. And some would even go as far as to say that some of these Indian tribes were part of the lost tribes. And I don't think there's any denying that. Their history, many of them talk about a great deluge. The Ute, the Paiute, Indians along the Zunis, some of the southern Utah, northern Arizona tribes. They tell a narrative that a flood washed the land and that the kings, whomever they may be, built pyramids in case there was another flood. And that the pyramids were a sort of vault. And as I've discussed before, pyramids were built on top of high plateaus, and they were just doorways into the subterranean worlds. So they carved out mountains, or the mountains were already structures that were turned into mountain looking. Who knows which came after which. And this all ties into it. In the sacerdotal writings of the ancient Egyptians, the word Utah signifies the eye. And as much as a sacred character in the name of the great deity of the Egyptians, Osiris, meaning the strong, the almighty, the most high, Osiris, the sun, the most high. And further, the sun was the material representative and object of worship. And this connection, then, Utah, The eye stood as signifying the source of light, illumination. And as such, the learned men of the Mormons who studied of the antique are well known, have probably given to their new and far off territory the name Utah. This is, we don't want to get hung up on thinking this. This territory was called Utah long, long, long before, very long before. Here's a little reference. Again, this U's and T's and H's, but you can see a lot of it here. To strong, the Almighty, just like it was saying. You got Utah, 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 Utah. To be strong, Utah, part of the same pronunciation, the whole sound intact, mighty. You got eyes, Utah, the Tau, and the hieroglyphic representation of it. Really, really important to remember, because often, the churches of today will say, the Mormons came there and just brandized things. No, these things were already there, already known by these phrases long, long before this. Just want to show a few more of my favorite images, and then we'll continue on. You're talking with some of the most incredible buildings, and you got these dirt roads. Just this wall was rebuilt. I'll show a picture later on of the original wall. It's one of the most ancient looking walls you've ever seen. The original wall that encapsulated the area. But yeah, you could see why anyone making a pilgrimage here and coming across a city like this, let alone this temple, you'd be stopping. But yeah, look at just the dirt roads, crazy. Where do I want to go next after that? Okay, so we were just talking about the temple, and then I'll show some pictures. The extinct race, Kansas, 1869. Workmen leveling a large mound on Temple Street. Temple Street is the road that runs in front of the temple that I just showed you. Temple Street, Salt Lake City. Okay, they found a giant mound. Big bones, fireplaces unearthed in Utah. Workmen are engaged in leveling a large mound on the block line between North and South Temple Streets. So this is like 3 blocks from the temple, okay? And the temple, this is 20 years removed, so-called removed from the temple being constructed. Now, I've described how the foundations of the temple go 60 feet below ground. 60 feet. Okay, just remember that. And supposedly, they're building at ground level. Well, the temple goes 60 feet down. And then this mound that's only a few blocks away, they're leveling it to continue construction. They're building a railroad depot. For the purposes of preparing the ground for the erection of a depot, warehouses for the Utah Railroad, like I said, yeah. In their labors, they exhumed many relics, which are interesting to archaeologists. Officer B.Y. Hampton brought a gunny sack full of boxes, fragments of pottery, flint arrowheads, pieces of sulfur, and species of bricks to our office this morning, which had just been dug up by the men engaged in leveling the ground. A row of fireplaces were discovered yesterday. 2 or 3 more were found today. And the bones which he brought were those of a skeleton, which was found in a sitting posture, with its chin resting on its breast. Now, in my California episode and in my Arizona episode, they find similar things. Okay, and this is the manner in which Chinese and Mongolians were buried. Near one of the fireplaces, the mound, which was a very large one for this country, seems to have been formed by the remains of the dead. Scarcely a shovel can be moved without disturbing bones. How long a period has elapsed since they were buried is hard to determine, but we should judge that many generations have passed away since this formation of the mound. All the small bones have disappeared, and no vestige of hair has been discovered thus far. We do not know whether the general average of the bones or the size of this skeleton is shown by Officer Hampton, but we have heard of several bones being found at previous times in the digging of the soil from this mound, which bore every evidence of belonging to men of larger stature than the present Utah Indians. The skeleton we saw was that of a large man. Officer Hampton measured 6 feet 2.5 inches. Now, again, we're not dealing with 9-foot giants, but 6'2". You remember in my Arizona articles, the average, Some of these quote, Chinese Mongolian burials, these people were like 5'4", okay, and smaller even. So, and when we eventually get to New Mexico on this series, we're going to get into Emperor Tigrinus, the red-headed king, who was the leader of a group of what they called pygmies, people that were about 4 feet, and he was 6'6". He was red-headed giant, and he was made king because he killed the beasts. And the things that were alive when this man was king will blow your mind. Saber-tooth, giant, I mean, just like things that are supposed to be millions of years old are not millions of years old, and they're finding them all over New Mexico, Utah, Arizona. Remember, lions were found in caves in Arizona. I didn't have time to work this into the Arizona. Maybe I'll go back and repost it. Lions like African lions, were found in Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico, and they were being hunted. Big game hunters were coming here in the 1850s to hunt these animals. The skeleton he saw was that of a large man. I already read that. I apologize. 6 feet 2.5 inches, and the thigh bone was larger than this. So they had a thigh bone, but not a whole skeleton. So on a whole skeleton, he was 6'2", but they had thigh bones much larger. One of the arm bones and one of the leg bones marks of having been fractured. The skull was tolerably large, resembling in shape the usual Indian type, lowbrow or highbrow, which is many different skeletal types. You remember that even some of the mounds of Georgia and Florida had Indian type. Now, when we get into phenotypes, it gets a little slippery, but there are many, many different types of people with a similar phenotype skull. But we're dealing with large, like they talked about with the Seminoles, right? 6'6", 6'9". So, yeah, this is Temple Street. A few blocks from the temple, they find a mound with basically giants for the area in them, and they can't even begin to date it. So this I think extends credence to what I've been saying. It's in the middle of the city. Okay, so there's buildings erected all around, and they're digging into this mound. Again, my images here are AI generated. I type in just a section of this, and these are the images that I use for this. But I like this one, and this is going to transition us into another one about the mounds that will help give a clearer picture for you guys. Mementos of Utah Mound Builders, Illinois, 1877. The mounds are 6 in number, cover 20 acres, excavating a large skeleton 6'6". In its hand, a huge steel weapon, large drilled stone pipe, 1,400 years ago, the Nephites and the Lamanites. A cement full of different seeds, cement case, sorry. So they're digging into a mound, okay? Mementos of the Utah Mound Builders. We are kindly, and I apologize, some of these don't always have the best textual appearance here, but you can follow my thread, and any of this stuff you want to go back to, you can just look at it yourself. We are kindly permitted by a gentleman of this place to make public the following interesting letter of a friend at Payson, Utah territory. The mounds are situated in what is known as the Payson Farm and are 6 in number, covering about 20 acres. 6 mounds covering 20 acres. Okay, these are some big, big mounds. Last year, while excavating of the larger mound, we discovered the feet of a large skeleton, and carefully removing the hardened earth in which it was embedded, we succeeded in unearthing an entire skeleton without injury. The human framework measured 6 feet 6 inches, and from its appearance, it was undoubtedly a male in gender. In the right hand was a huge iron or steel weapon, which had been buried with the body, but which crumbled to pieces on handling. Near the skeleton, we also found pieces of cedar wood. Okay, cedar wood. Cedar existed all over this region, and they built with cedar, the land of cedar. Okay, this is just, remember that when we're thinking about Galilee and the Dead Sea and the Jordan River and making pilgrimage to the Holy Land, cedars are an important note there as well. Just like in Arizona, cedars that don't exist in Arizona, but every building had cedar joists. Near the skeleton, we also found pieces of cedar wood cut in various fantastic shapes and in a perfect state of preservation. The engraving showing that the people of this unknown race were acquainted with the use of edged tools. We also found a large stone pipe, the stem of which was inserted between the teeth of the skeleton. The bowl of the pipe weighed 5 ounces, made of sandstone, and the aperture for the tobacco had the appearance of being drilled. The inhabitants here say a race of people existed here 1,400 years ago. Okay, so they're talking the Indians. This is their story. That there were a race of people that existed here 1,400 years ago and belonged to a tribe known as the Nephites. This is what the Indians are telling them. That the people existed here 1,400 years ago, belonged to a tribe known as the Nephites, who are often referred to in the Book of Mormon, which also speaks of a terrible encounter these people had with their ancient enemy, the Lamanites. We found another skeleton near the above mentioned, which was not quite as large and must be that of a woman. There was a neatly carved tombstone at the head of the skeleton. Close by, the floor was covered with a hard cement, to all appearances a part of solid rock. But after patient labor and exhaustive work, we succeeded in penetrating and found it was the corner of a box, similarly constructed, a cement box, in which we found about 3 pints of wheat kernels, most of which dissolved when brought in contact with the light in the air. Few of the kernels found in the center of the heap looked bright and retained their freshness on being exposed. They were carefully preserved and last spring planted and grew freely through the field. Insects seemed determined to devour it. We raised 4.5 pounds of heads from these few grains. The wheat is unlike anything other raised in this country and produces a large yield. It is of the club variety. The heads are very young and hold very large grains. We have found many curiosities in the mounds belonging to this ancient race, once to the inhabitants of this section. Now, again, go back through my older videos. I talk about mummy corn and mummy wheat. They found mummy wheat and mummy corn buried with these mummies. They've planted it and were absolutely blown away. The mummy corn, I talked about this on my show with Longo just the other day. The mummy corn they planted, okay? Listen to this, you guys. The mummy corn grew to 20 feet, and the lowest corn stalk was 13 feet off the ground. Okay? Absolutely unbelievable. In the 1830s, 40s, and 50s, they were saying that the Ophir of Solomon must have been America because the wheat alone is unlike any wheat in the world. All the wheat of the world comes from here. The oldest wheat comes from America. The oldest corn comes from the Americas, and it's unlike anything left today. It can grow in the desert. It can grow with barely any water. The stalks are monumental and huge. They yield 4-5 times as much wheat and corn as what we grow today. The color is completely different. It's a completely different type. Okay, very ancient. I don't know why I closed that. Once inhabiting this section, we had houses in all the mounds. Houses in all the mounds. Houses. And the rooms of which are as perfect as the day they were built. All the apartments are nicely plastered. Sonnet in white, others in red. Painted, I can't read that word, I apologize. Crockeryware, cooking utensils, vases, many of the patterns similar to the present age. Painting a similar type of the present age. Upon one large stone jug or vase can be traced a perfect, oh man, I apologize again. Basically, they painted a perfect picture of the mountains near here for a distance of 20 miles. We have found several millstones used in grinding corn and wheat, and plenty of charred corn cobs with kernels not unlike, though known as yellow corn. We judge from our observations that these ancient dwellers of our country followed agriculture for a livelihood and had many of the arts and sciences known to us. Yeah, the man was buried with a metal axe, metallurgy. Okay, what do we talk about? The same thing was found all over Arizona. Agriculture was the whole of Arizona was covered in canals, and they were growing food for millions and millions of people. Millions of people. The same thing is extending up into Utah, and the sciences were known to them. We found molds Molds made of clay for casting. Exactly. These people, metallurgy, these people were mining, they were smelting, they were blacksmithing. Okay. This is not a Stone Age people. For casting different implements, needles made of deer horns and laths made of stone, and which were in good shape. We also in many trinkets, such as white stone beads and marbles. The good is made now, as good is made now. Also small squares of polished stones resembling dominoes. Dominoes. Crazy. Love that one. So again, mounds so large that they are houses. I would say that they weren't mounds, they were houses that were covered by sand over, a millennia of time. Who knows how long it would take to bury them, but that farmer had 6 on his land, 6 of them that covered 20 acres. Those are some big mounds. Um, okay, we'll keep going. Cities, should we do more cities? We'll do the pipe one later. We'll do this one because this is on a farmer's field. Prehistoric beast, Provo, Utah. Bones a farmer uncovered while digging a ditch near here were described by the University of Utah geologists today as those of an extinct form of elephant, covered with hair, about 15 inches long, with an undercoat of wool. It stood 12 feet high at the shoulders and was much larger than the African elephant. Really important because this was found near the surface. So we're dealing with a people that were, I would say, most likely um, using these animals in daily life. This wasn't found 100 feet below ground. We were dealing with 4, 5, 6-story buildings that were buried in mounds, and this elephant was found below ground level. Monster petrified fish. Monster petrified fish found in Utah, Salt Lake City, and monster fish about 50 feet in length has been discovered encased in the rocks in Garfield County, Utah, about 70 miles east of Panguitch by Sheriff James Goulding of Garfield County and T.W. Smith of Salt Lake, who were prospecting in the section. 4 years ago, at practically the same spot, the fossil remains of a giant lizard were found. Goulding and Smith have offered their find to the University of Utah. I was lucky enough to find that very article. So we'll read that one next, and then we'll get into some buried cities and ruins. This is the dinosaur. I hate using the word dinosaur. They didn't say dinosaur. They just said reptile. The dinosaur term came much later. Apologize for my voice. Lizard will fill 15 cars. Prehistoric beast of prehistoric Utah is quarried from solid rock. A 5th boxcar, a trained boxcar, a 5th boxcar loaded with part of a skeleton of a Utah lizard started Wednesday for the Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh. It is thought that the remaining bones of the lizard will fill 10 more cars. The skeleton is being excavated on the banks of the Green River near Jensen, Utah. It is 84 feet long and is quarried in blocks out of solid rock. This is that lizard they were just discussing. So they're finding a 50-foot fish and an 84-foot long lizard. Just bringing the antiquity thing much closer. We're going to get into this mummy here. This will help kind of connect some dots here. Here's the image it created from the text. I just think it's great. Ancient city in Utah. By a late arrival from Salt Lake County, it is stated that the ancient city has been discovered in the southern part of the territory. There were found immense quantities of broken, burnt earthenware, painted according to their taste. Arrow, paint, adobes, burnt brick, and a crucible. Crucible. We talked about crucibles, mining, and every color of flintstones. The ruins were about 2 miles long. The ruins were 2 miles long and 1 mile wide. Huge, you guys. One of them appeared to be the remains of a temple and covered about an acre of ground. And digging into one of the ruins, pottery, adobes, and fireplace and burnt embers and fire were found. Just like Arizona and California, the desert is the desert because something happened. What makes that quantity of sand? I don't think millions of years. I think in a serious event. Where do I want to go with this next? We'll do the dragon. We'll do the mummy, and then we'll do the dragon. 158 people. Thank you again, everybody, for being here. What the Fuck TV, Paul, love you, man. Good to see you. Sherry, Mo Harrison, Lady Lokes, Odin's Raven, London McLovin, Joe Cool, Brett, as always, Brett, thank you. David M. Do you think ChatGPT knows this? I don't know. I plan on doing some videos with ChatGPT, but I'm not there quite yet. Maggie Ray, Jay, Sherry, everybody. Again, I'm bad at looking at comments, but thank you, Skeptic, I appreciate you. Thanks for being here. And Paul, always nice. Thanks, guys. Okay, we'll get back into this. Mummies found in Utah. Mummies found in Utah, Salt Lake City, Utah, April 19th. Charles A. Lang, an explorer from Pittsburgh, arrived in the city Wednesday with 7 well-preserved mummies discovered beneath the ruins of the cliff dwellers' houses in southeastern Utah. These mummies are in an extraordinary state of preservation, which is accounted for by the entire absence of moisture from the atmosphere and the earth in that district. Among the collection is a male of giant stature, 2 females, and 2 boys. They are not bodies of the cliff dwellers, but are of some race who lived before them. Their hair is reddish instead of black, as with the cliff dwellers. Now, this has happened in Arizona now, where we found redheaded mummies below a more recent, before a more recent group. Okay. Buried beneath. Here's what AI printed up. Fantastic. Everyone thought this was real. I mean, this looks so good. You know, not everyone appreciates the AI, but I love it. Bringing a picture to the article. You know, we're all photographic learners. Like an image speaks 1,000 words. So I'm really enjoying this. You know, some people have problems with AI. Whatever, that's fine. You don't like it, you don't have to look at it. That's okay. You're entitled to your opinion. Buried cities. Man, what do I want to cover next? Should we do the cities? Yeah, let's jump in. This is a beast. It's one of my favorites. So this one's going to take a little while, but absolutely required. From here, we'll hop into some caves. Yeah, what they found in some caves. Some pretty cool stuff. Here's the AI for the first set. Just beautiful. So similar. Extraordinary discoveries in Utah. Okay, now this article, you guys, is one of the oldest articles that I could find about Utah. Literally one of the oldest. Finding anything about Utah written with this, an exploratory party. I mean, this must have been, to be honest with you, one of the first explorer parties to write and make it to the public. I'm sure there were private parties exploring these regions long before, because a lot of these people knew exactly what was going on out here. 1855. Okay. 1855 articles in this area, incredibly rare. Extraordinary discoveries. Last October, a party of Mormons left Salt Lake City to explore the southern sections of Utah Territory, of which nothing was known, with the hope of opening trade with the Navajo Indians, who are in that quarter and possess large quantities of goat, sheep, horses, and engaged in the manufacture of blankets. Now remember, the narrative originally was that the horses were due to the Spanish. This is a fallacy. The Spanish stole horses from the Indians. Okay, and they weren't just called Indians. Now, we're going to make some references here to New Granada, and the New Granada is Old Granada, and that Salt Lake was a capital of the Old Granada. A Mormon, what's a Mormon? Well, in 1600s, a Mormon, okay, is not what it was deemed. It's not what we think it was. Who possess large quantities of goat, sheep, and horses, and are engaged in the manufacture of blankets, leather, iron, and gold and silver ornaments. The party returned on the 21st of December with the news of most astonishing discoveries. Among other wonders stumbled on were the ruins of a large city similar to the far-famed Petra in the eastern desert, surpassing it in extent. Dr. Huntington, head of the party, immediately published an account in the Deseret News, which we take the following particulars. First discovery of ruins. On the north side of the St. John. Now, you can literally go to a St. John River all over America. There's dozens, and there will be ruins on that down that river. I can almost guarantee it. I don't know why. The St. John, Paul's in chat. We've broken down. He's broken down, and I've broken down the name John. I don't think there's a coincidence why they're naming these rivers the St. John River. Again, that's not the ancient name. More than likely is the name given to by the Spanish, but you can follow a St. John's River in almost every state, and there's going to be some ancient aspect to it. And about 500 miles southeast from the Great Salt Lake, we traveled over a section of country mostly among the mountains and about 40 miles in length, up and down the river by 25 miles in width, covered with the ruins of former towns and villages. The walls of many buildings are still standing entire, some of them 3 or 4 stories high, with the ends of the red cedar joist yet in the wall. The land of cedars. We're going back to the biblical references here, I promise. Just remember that. The red cedars yet in the wall, some projecting 8 or 10 inches, but worn to a point at their extremities. Every building was a fortification built in the strongest manner imaginable and in a style that the present age knows nothing of. Many of them still plainly show the whole manner of structure and even the marks of the workman's tools. The first ruins were discovered where 3 stone buildings crumbled to mere heaps. One appeared to have been a pottery, for in and around it were loads of fragments of crockery of fine quality, ornamented with a great variety of pictures, painted with the various colors, as if put on but yesterday. Here's the image for the next part. A fortified city. From here we traveled about 10 miles, with occasional ruins by the way, and entered a deep canyon with projecting shelves of rock, and under these shelves were the houses or fortifications. The one we examined was divided into 24 rooms, each nearly square and enclosing an area of about 104 square feet. 144. The front of the walls was built up to the overhanging cliff which formed the roof, and was curved and full of portholes. The stones were all squared and faced, and of an equal thickness, and laid up with joints broken in a workmanlike manner. The only entrance we could find was a hole about 2 feet square and 18 inches in the ground, which is the usual size of the doors, both outer and partition, with the exception of some subterranean entrances, which were yet smaller and more difficult to find. Through the perfection of the rocky roof, there was very little rubbish in the rooms. From the first room, we passed through a small hole in the right-hand corner to the second, there through another hole to the third, and so on. From the left room to the right, and right to the left. Through the 24 rooms, and eventually wall was supplied with portholes. 50 yards above this was a large cave, with a narrow winding entrance, guarded by a high wall. Okay, so not only do these little cliff dwellings, have 24 rooms, but they have caves and tunnels that go into the mountains. This is something we were kind of covering a little bit in California and a little bit more in Arizona, that these cliffs, there are tunnels that are hundreds of miles long in these mountains. And the Navajo and many of the Indians use them for 100 years to escape not only their enemies, but a lot of the U.S. government's expansion. And hundreds and hundreds of miles, this subterranean world. And I think these little cliff dwelling were just entrances. opening into the rock leading off into the mountain. We did not explore. Yeah, it went so far they didn't even find the end of it. Just like we were saying with some of the Arizona ones. Some of the Arizona caves are so large they never found the end, and you never find an article. There are caves just like that in Utah. They're so large we never find the end. Either the oxygen gets too light and they almost pass out and they have to turn around, or there's a water obstruction, or that there was a deluge of some kind that washed unbelievable amounts of debris into these caves and they can't go further. Buildings were everywhere in view, of various forms and dimensions, and in almost every stage of decay. From here to St. John's River, a distance of 10 miles, there were scattering ruins. And from there, 12 miles northeast. So I kind of added up the mileage here, and over their 400-mile journey, there were stone cities for at least 200 plus miles of their journey. So we're not dealing with just little habitations here and there. We're dealing with massive, similar to that one I first read, 4 miles long. But we're talking hundreds of miles of territory covered in cities, endless cities. There were scattering ruins from here and there. 12 miles northeast, we came to the head of a canyon whose sides or banks, even to the very head, were perpendicular and shelving, and near the banks there was no soil on the rocks. Right on the brink of this precipice and under the shelves of the rock beneath were the best building sites for those who built and dwelt here ages ago. Here's the last image. Another stronghold. All around the head of this canyon and down the other side, as far as we could see, were houses of every conceivable form and size. And in places where the soil was sufficient, there were overgrown with sage and cedars growing wild. Okay. Really important note, as I've been saying. In every respect, like that on the mountains around, in the center of this canyon and near the head was a building 16 or 20 feet square, 4 stories high, and built upon a flat rock, about 4 feet higher than the level of the bed of the canyon, and but little broader than the building. To this we could not find an entrance, and unlike all the rest, it had no portholes. One large building, which we entered, stood on the edge of the precipice, with its front wall circular and flush with the bank, which formed the back part, making the ground plan of the building like a half moon. There were no windows in the lower story of any building, and every entrance had made as difficult as hidden as possible. So, like the Indians were saying, there was a war between the Nephites and the Lamanites, and they retreated into the canyons and were living inside the mountains. And these were all defensively constructed that even if someone broke inside, they would have to run through this incredible labyrinth they'd have to crawl through. Every entrance was made as difficult and hidden as possible. The door or hole into the one last mentioned was guarded by 2 or 3 walls at different angles. So yeah, they're stacking the walls at different angles like a labyrinth, thus making a crooked, narrow passage to the door. And every part of this passage was in full view from the portholes of the building, the front wall being full of them, like pigeonholes, pointing in every possible direction. They were not more than 2 inches in diameter on the outside and plastered smooth on the inside with a kind of cement, with which the stones are laid and the rooms plastered. So the plaster is really important, you guys. Now, if you can just bear with me here and think of the sandstone, the breakdown of sandstone, and when wood petrifies, part of the wood turns into sandstone, right? And when your sandstone is very pliable, and when you're building into sandstone, sandstone naturally just wears off the walls with time. So I think that they're plastering these walls because they would just have never-ending dust, and they're choosing the sandstone not only because it's soft and pliable, but it also there's this incredible calling for me that we're dealing with very large trees. Um, and we'll talk more about petrifactions, but this whole area is covered in petrifactions. There was some kind of event here, not just a flood, but an electrical event. The land shows incredible scarring, electrical scarring, and the way things were petrified lends very much credence to an event of some kind of electrical, because high voltage can petrify something in an instant. Humans, linemen, working on power lines. Every year, there are men that have parts of their body petrified, their feet, their hands, a whole limb, instantly. So you imagine a giant event of some kind petrifying, the entire Southwest, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, parts of Colorado. And yeah, the trees being rot, and that's what creates the sand. The billions and trillions of tons of sand are remnants of the petrifactions of trees, and sandstone is a byproduct. And when like I told you, they were harvesting from the Arizona episode, there was a standing forest in Arizona, petrified cedars, and the mining company cut the entire thing down because they were getting iridium, radium, sorry, silver, gold, you name it. Inside of a petrified tree, they find 20 to 30 different minerals. And so they cut the whole forest down. But yeah, that's a little bit of a rabbit hole in a different direction there. But the plaster walls is key because they're carving these rooms out. They're carving into the mountain. Man, where was I? Portholes, not more than 2 inches, cement with which stones are laid and the rooms plastered so that it's hard as stone. Yep. The inside arrangement of all the houses was much alike, all having portholes in the partition walls, and all an obscure passage was one room to another, and one to two houses into the mountain. Some of the cliffs above were connected with those below. Like I was saying, they have tunnels all inside these mountains. The houses up on the top of the cliff had tunnels going to the bottom of the cliff. And I'd say that goes on and on and on and on and on. Like the Arizona articles, 100 miles of tunnels, they can never find the end of them. I would say that's definitely the case here all over the American Southwest. We're going to do 2 more cave articles, and then we're going to start talking about the biblical references to Utah, and that they predate the Mormons. As we already stated, the Mormons didn't come here. The quote Mormons were already here. There are different kinds of Mormons, and the dates and names and all that is long before the narrative that we're being handed. So yeah, let's do two cave articles. Let's look at chat real quick. 160 people in the chat. Thank you so much. Hope everyone's enjoying this article. Again, with the 90 minutes that flies by, we have very little time left, and there's so much more to this. So I really want to end strong with talking about some biblical references to Utah and how these names, again, we've already explored that the names existed long before, quote, white settlers came west. These names were already here. And there were peoples, giants, whatever you want to call them, fighting each other. The Nephites and the Lamanites were a name that existed amongst the Indians before the Book of Mormon was ever published, you guys. Okay? That's an important thing to remember. Not to mention, we made the Micmac Egyptian reference to the iconography of the golden tablets found in New York. Joseph Smith, we showed you some of the Egyptian iconography branding that existed on the first 5 temples. The first 5 temples were completely different and unlike anything you'd ever seen. If you want to, again, look at them yourself, just look up the first 6 Mormon temples, skip Nauvoo, and yeah, Provo, Salt Lake. I'm spacing some of the other ones, but yeah, the first 6, and they're unbelievable. The buildings are incredible, and they're covered in Egyptian hieroglyphics. Prehistoric cave, walls covered with pictures and hieroglyphics, Ogden, Utah. With what appears to be prehistoric hieroglyphics carved on the walls, a mammoth cave rivaling the famous caves of Kentucky was discovered in the vicinity yesterday. Thomas Whitaker, a rancher, discovered it. He will head a party of University of Utah professors on a tour of investigation. The cave is located in the mountains near Promontory Point, 15 miles from Ogden, and has probably never been visited by white men, as the surrounding country is a bleak desert. The front chamber Okay, they never finished exploring this cave, and the uh, the government took it over. You never hear anything else about this cave. I looked up this location. A mining company got their hands on it down the road. Go figure. The front chamber is 75 by 150 yards. Okay, big, and is 41 feet high. Now, this is incredibly uncommon. This chamber is basically, a perfect rectangle. The height doesn't vary. At least they don't describe it to. And when I've read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of caves articles, height and floor and size, this one clearly shows that you're dealing with a defined geometric chamber. The front chamber is 75 by 150 yards, 41 feet high. That's just a big ass chamber. And the walls bear pictures of Indians crudely drawn. There is an Indian legend current with this location to the effect that a great battle was fought years ago between two tribes. Which two tribes? The Lamanites and the Nephites. Near the point, the vanquished having perished in a mammoth cave. Now, you remember an article I covered in my Arizona episode where they found 400 skeletons in a cave. 400. Okay. These people retreated into the mountain. Okay. And when they found these bodies, they found tunnels leading for miles. They couldn't find all of into the tunnels. So these people were living inside the mountains, and they were chased by their rivals who trapped them and then lit fires for like a week straight outside the entrance and smothered them, suffocated 400 people. You can imagine how many more times this happened. So yeah, Mammoth Cave outside Ogden, showing very geometric shapes. Let's do. Oh, we don't want to forget that one. Let's do. Okay, we'll do the multitudes of crystals, and then we'll do the dragon, and then we'll finish with the biblical references to Utah. Multitudes of crystals, perfectly transparent. They cover a wonderful mound discovered in Utah. Those who are at all interested in the study of rocks and stones have probably observed some of the peculiar secretions and nodules which frequently occur in certain kinds of stratified rock. Now, this goes back to the tree reference, you guys. I know this is a hard one to wrap your mind around sometimes, but when you look at how a tree, when it's petrified, it creates agates of all kinds. Okay, now you take a petrified tree, and then you magnify it by 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times. Can you imagine the size of some of these agates they're finding? Well, this, I think, strengthens that. These structures are usually round. Some of them, indeed, are almost perfect spheres. Thunder eggs, right? I, as a child, was very much in love with rocks. And my father worked for a construction company. He was doing a big renovation out in the middle of the Oregon desert in Eastern Oregon, and there was nothing to do. But there was a public rock quarry where you could go dig thunder eggs. And I remember at 3 days of digging, it was 100 degrees. 3 days of digging. I was probably 8 years old. I found my own thunder egg, and the guy cut it open with the saw. I wish I still had it. I'm probably my mother still has it, but just incredible. I just remember thinking like that it looked like a little version of the world. Now I wish to tell you of a geode, which in the form and appearance and probability, also in process of formation, is very much like those referred to, but of mammoth proportions. Now, we talk about thunder eggs, and they range in sizes, but the largest that I've seen, generally like 3-4 feet. That's insane. Usually they're like baseball, softball size. That's average. Now this gets even more of a slippery slope when you think about gallstones and kidney stones. Look very similar, and they have an almost identical formation. Now, if you think about titans, right? You want to go down that rabbit hole. Not only trees create these too, but titans, animals, creatures that have gallstones and kidney stones, they look identical to these geodes. So, magnify the size of a geode to have a gallstone as big as a baseball, a softball, or as big as this one in the article. Just wait. Now, I wish to tell you of a geode. Yeah, I skipped that. Probably also in process of formation is very much like those referred to, but of mammoth proportions. It is composed of pure gypsum or selenite, and many of the single crystals are of gigantic size. This wonderful formation was discovered within a few miles of the majestic Henry Mountains in southern Utah. It is situated in a small tributary of the Fremont Canyon, and this in turn leads to the Grand Canyon of the Colorado. The crystals occur in a cave, which is enclosed in a shell of gypsum, and this mound like structure stands on the side of a sandstone hill. Sandstone. This is a sandstone tree. This is lying on the side of a big tree that's been blasted. Again, just ideas to think about. This is the geode which we have come to see. What a contrast with the land specimens we have been accustomed to examine. Right, the land specimens, the ones they found in just lying about, were small, like baseballs. From without, the mound appears to be roughly egg-shaped. Okay, this helping you picture the shape of this geode. It is almost 25 feet long and 10 feet wide, and averages 20 feet from the ground on the lower side to the top. The lower side of the top, it is composed entirely of selenite, even the outside exhibiting a multitude of crystal faces, which sparkle in the sunlight with a brilliancy that commands admiration from a distance of miles. So they could see this thing glittering for miles. On the east end, an opening occurs large enough to admit a man without discomfort. Within one may make his way backward about 25 feet. Okay, so it's egg shaped. They could only see the front part of it. They got inside of it and they're walking 20 feet inside of this geode. And by exercising care, he may clamber up between the crystals to a height of 15 feet. So he's walked 25 feet back inside this geode and he can climb up 15 feet. Okay. So that's why look at this picture. And this picture is just tiny in comparison. I put those phrases in and this is what it made, but it's even bigger than this picture. This thing is humongous. The inner walls bear a multitude of huge crystals which project into the cavern from either side, a few extending completely across like immense beams. Okay. So inside of this geode, he's standing inside of it. He can climb up. Some of the crystals are so big they grow all the way across like beams. Several of the crystals which have been sawed off from the walls are even larger and heavier than the body of a full-grown man. Perfect prisms of selenite, 5 feet in length, are found. One of the finest to be seen is 51 inches long, and attached to one of its faces are 19 smaller crystals. Twin crystals in great variety are common, and groups, each containing many beautiful prisms, also occur. We took from the floor of the cavern a very large group, weighing over 600 pounds, containing numerous individual crystals. Many of the crystals are of perfect transparency. Others are covered with a thin layer of sand and clay, which must be removed that the luster and purity of the substance may be rendered apparent. A few feet below the floor, which is made up mostly of sand driven in by the wind, we found the gypsum shell closes in, forming therefore a perfect nodule or geode. So they removed the sand and found the nice curved bottom of the geode. I mean, this crystal is unbelievable, guys, and the kind of event that would be necessary to create this, but not only what type of living organism would be necessary to create this is absolutely insane. Just let your mind wander with that. Was it a titan? Was it a giant? Was it a giant creature? Was it a giant tree? It was an organic structure of some kind. I guarantee you that. And to be so big that he climbs into it and can walk 25 feet back and climb 15 feet up is just unbelievable. I mean, I've never, ever, ever found an article in all my years in these articles of a crystal like that. And I love crystals, kind of obsessed with them. and I've dug into crystals and never. I mean, this was just one of my favorites. Just unbelievable. um, hey bud. It's almost time for school. There we go. We're down on time. We got 15 minutes. Okay. What do I want to choose from? Should we do the Bryce Scale? We gotta do the Nature's Bridges. Man, I'm gonna run out of time here. There's so many good ones here. Um, we gotta do the Dragon. Pulse of Western Progress, Nebraska, 1894. Bold discovery at Salina Canyon, Utah. 3 miles of rich placer ground, hardships of the desert, a delirious wanderer rescued from his companion found in his last slumber. Monster of a prehistoric reptile. Up in the mountains about 5 miles west of this town is a curious formation in solid limestone consisting of a circular hole having a diameter of about 3 feet and unknown depth, and has long been regarded as the crater of a prehistoric geyser. Mr. J.P. Hardy, a well-known mining man, determined to explore it for the purposes of prospecting the rock for the mineral. After descending about 80 feet, the passage was found to be blocked by debris washed in from above, which, after cleaning away, disclosed the entrance to a vast underground cavern. As soon as he could accustom his sight to his surroundings, Mr. Hardy found himself in the midst of one of the grandest sights ever beheld by the eye of man. On every hand, stately columns caused by the dripping of water through the limestone rose from the floor in graceful form to meet a counterpart descending from the roof. A partial exploration of a few hundred yards brought him to what appeared to be a line of white barrel hoops, standing upright and extending away into the darkness, farther than this one candle could shed its rays. Judge of this astonishment to find, on examining, that he had discovered the petrified skeleton of an enormous reptile, perfect in every detail from head to tail. The bones of the head showed plainly that the monster was well equipped for aggressive warfare. Curved fangs hinged to the upper jaw, 18 inches long, lay in place of what was once a huge mouth, which could open easily 4 feet. Judging from the articulation, the monster lay in a nearly straight line, and Mr. Handy found upon pacing it out, it measured upwards of 120 feet. 120-foot long lizard or dragon. About 50 feet from the head lay a number of bones that appeared to belong to the skeleton, and which Mr. Hardy concluded were the wings. Further examination disclosed the presence of legs, though only one of these was in good condition. Judge Watson, who has read much on prehistoric mammalia and fossils, states that this is probably the only perfect specimen of a dragon in existence. The Smithsonian Institution has been informed of the find, and we expect we will have a representative here in a few days. Mr. Hardy refused one offer of $20,000 for his find and states that nothing short of $50,000 will purchase it. He has been trying to keep the discovery a secret in order to prepare for the rush that is sure to follow its announcement. But we are here to write up the news, and our readers may look for more disclosures as the cavern is further explored. Well, you guys, let me tell you what, there are no explorations. The Smithsonian shows up, and he wanted 50 grand, and they paid him 50 grand. I guarantee it. Um, I've talked about the Smithsonian ad nauseum over the years, and they were paying hundreds of thousands of dollars, even in the 1800s. In the early 1900s, they offered a $5 million bounty for the lizard in the Congo, or the dragon of the Congo. $5 million in the early 1900s is a insane amount of money to get the lizard in the Congo. So this is what they did. If they couldn't buy you out, they just got rid of you. And so, yeah, the Smithsonian's been notified. He didn't tell anybody where this place was. They showed up. They wrote him a check. They probably said, you need to leave town, and we're going to take over. And that was it. This happens all the time. Once we get into Colorado, we're going to get into some articles where the governor was pleading with the federal government for protection because the Smithsonian was coming in and stealing relics and shipping them to the east, not to the East Coast, to Europe. And there's been a lot of hypothesis over the years that has shown that the quote historical relics of Egypt may have in fact come from America. And yeah, I think reading enough of these articles, it's pretty obvious the Smithsonian gets there, and then this find is you never hear from it again, never ever again. So 50 grand, they were happy to pay it. And can you imagine? I mean, this is 1894, you guys. $50,000. That is an insane amount of money. Now imagine 5 million. Okay, the bounty for that dragon in the Congo attracted some of the biggest big game hunters in the world, and they all went there. Okay, so one more we have to touch on because it's really going to help kind of build the image of what my dog is being super annoying. Sophie, please come on. Nature builds bridges. 3 natural bridges, the only ones of their kind in the world, symmetrical. Considerable numbers dwelt near the bridges. Ruins near each, considerable in size. Winds covered with sand. Nothing but mounds remain. Trees grow on them. Among the canyons of the southeastern Utah are the great natural bridges, forming the only group of the kind in the world, unless more are to be found some day in this same vast, mysterious Colorado River plateau, which is constantly yielding new surprises to explorers. The Rainbow Bridge is the largest of all natural arches yet discovered, and is only 4 miles from the summit of Navajo Mountain, from which the bridge appears as the tiniest of arches in a wilderness of rock. It was not discovered until 1909. It is 309 feet high with a span of 278 feet. The group bridges in Utah have been set aside by the government. The Caroline Bridge is about 3 miles from Edwin. It is a wonderfully symmetrical bridge of pinkish sandstone. The tremendous thickness of the stone above the arch rather dwarfs the arch itself in dimension, height. 205 feet, thickness at the top of the arch, 107 feet, span 186 feet. The Augusta Bridge, which is about 2 miles from Caroline, and which also spans the White Canyon, is of light-colored sandstone. Against the contrast, it is 222 feet high and spanned 261 feet. It is evident that the cliff dwellers lived in considerable numbers near the natural bridge group. There are ruins near each of the bridges. This is important. These cliff ruins are of considerable size. In this country of sweeping winds and constantly shifting sands, it does not take long for ruins to be filled in, and sometimes nothing but mounds remain. As we've already just shown, all these 4 or 5-story houses, advanced houses with fireplaces, metallurgy, okay, they're buried by mounds of sand. These mounds become covered with vegetation, and sometimes large cotton trees grow on top of them. Okay, just think of the age required. Think of the age required for sand to slowly cover a 5-story building, and then for large trees to grow on that. Work of exploration here, similar to that is carried on in the Mesa Verde National Park, undoubtedly will prove well worthwhile. Ruins can be plainly traced in the sand as the bottom of the White Canyon near the Caroline Bridge and at other places. All of these bridges are surrounded by ruins. Clues in the pottery. The smallest of the 3 group bridges is the Edwin, which is 104 feet high with a span of 194 feet and 10 feet thick at the top of the arch. It is Posacan to that discovered in Pueblo ruins further south. The same symbolic figures, notably, listen closely, the same symbolic figures, notably the Iwanu, which is something akin to the swastika, are to be found in these Utah ruins, showing that the cliff dweller people here were related to those in southwestern Colorado, northeastern Arizona, and northwestern New Mexico. Now, really important fact, okay? So this is what the AI generated here. I am saying that these are constructed, okay? The bridges are surrounded by gigantic cities that have been melted or destroyed or whatever, melted, destroyed, and buried, several things. They're covered in swastikas. Now, the swastika is great because when we covered the history of the name Utah and how it comes long before the Mormons, and well, the Mormons that we're referencing, our timeline Mormons, and that the swastika, like the Phoenicians, like the Egyptians, and all of these races that shared that root word of Utah, shared the same symbols. And the swastika, as many of you already know, is found all over the world. So we're dealing with a worldwide culture. Okay, we're not just dealing with some people surviving out in the desert. A culture that could build these bridges and these cities. And there's one that is really important that goes along with this exact area that I want to touch on. Here we go. So this is right below the same area of the bridge. Okay. Prehistoric race in Utah, probably irrigated. Ogden, Utah. Belief that the ancient dwellers of Utah used water for irrigation purposes is held by forestry officials. We already know that there's canals all over. Here, as the result of the recent unearthing in the severe forest, again, this forest is right below, it's right next to these arches in southern Utah, what is said to be a stone pipeline. Okay, they're digging in the forest, people cutting down trees. Discovery of the pipeline was made in 1917 by two forest rangers who went to France, blah, blah, blah. They're just telling the story from the observations made that the pipeline probably was used to carry water for domestic purposes also. The relics will be turned over to the University of Utah Archaeology Department. So just below, in the forest below these arches, they find stone pipes. Stone pipes. Okay. Not just canal work, but stone pipes. Like ridiculous, the effort that it would take. This had to have been a metropolis that was absolutely wrecked. Absolutely wrecked. Man, I feel pretty good. I think we made through a lot of what I wanted to talk about. Now we can talk about. Now we'll bounce around, look at chat. Everybody, thank you so much for being here. And I'm the worst at looking at chat, as you already all know. But I'm grateful for all of you guys being here. We're going to hop over and do a little biblical Bible study with references to Utah here, and we'll finish up with that. So we'll go ahead and let's do the other screen now. All right. So I'm going to read a passage here. If you want to dive deeper into this, Karimo, who I've done so many series with, he has two different videos on Utah, and he dives deeper into this part. And it's definitely worth a watch. So if you want a little bit of a deeper dive into these biblical references to Utah, I would recommend his video. Just search Utah on his channel. But yeah, so we're going to read Deuteronomy 34 here, the death of Moses. So remember, we talked about California being an island and the Red Sea was the sea between. Okay. Then Moses climbed Mount Nebo from the plains of Moab. Okay, we're going to stop right there. I'm going to go here. Okay. And we're going to, okay, why is it doing that? Okay. So he left the plains of Moab. Okay, here we are. Colorado. Okay. New Mexico, Arizona. Okay. Here we are in the state. Everyone can see this okay. This will be kind of a quick overview. Like I said, Garimo's video is fantastic and goes a little more into the depth, but my niche has been the articles, and we'll dive into some articles here too that'll kind of substantiate this. But here we are in Moab, okay, to Mount Nebo. Okay, here's Mount Nebo. Okay, and this is a gigantic mountain. Okay, so here's Moab. Here's Mount Nebo, right? Okay, we already talked about Salt Lake City here. We talked about the Great Salt Lake, the Dead Sea, Utah Lake, the Sea of Galilee. Okay, both of these, this is what they were stated as, okay? And the Jordan River that connects both of them, okay? We started off the episode talking about all the high level masons and Shriners, that this was Mecca. and that they took their pilgrimage to the Salt Lake Temple and hitched their camels. Okay. At the top, the plains of Moab to the top of Pisgah, across from Jericho, the Lord showed him the whole land. Okay, Mount Nebo is gigantic. Okay, the Nebo of Palestine is not even a mountain. They don't even call it a mountain. They call it an elevation. This is like 5 times as large. You can't see anything from the Nebo of Palestine, and from this one you can see absolutely the valley. The Lord showed him the whole land. Okay, so what's another important reference here is Mount Nebo in the 1850s, this region was called the mining lands of Ophir, okay, of Solomon. They called this the mining lands of Ophir, Mount Nebo and the mining lands of Ophir, okay? Important reference. He showed him the whole land. So he showed him the whole land. You're not showing anyone a whole land on 2,000 feet, which is about the elevation of Nebo of Palestine, whereas this one's about 12,000. From Gilad to Dan, okay? Remember that name, Dan, okay? There is no Dan, but there is Daniel, Utah, just north of here, outside of Provo, okay? Which is right inside that reference that we were making between the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea. The territory of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah, as far as the Mediterranean Sea, the Negev and the whole region of the valley from Jericho, the city of palms. Now this area is covered in palm trees, southern especially. The Lord said to him, "This is the land I promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give it to your descendants. I have let see it with your eyes, but you will not cross over into it." And Moses and the servant of the Lord died there in Moab. And the Lord had said he buried him in Moab, in the valley opposite Beth-yor. But to this day, no one knows where his grave is. Moses was 120 years old when he died, yet his eyes were not weak, nor his strength gone. The Israelites grieved for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days, until the time of weeping and mourning was over. Now, these customs of mourning and weeping you find amongst the Indians in the Southwest. Again, we talked about the Hebraic, not only the language, but the symbols and the customs amongst some of these Indians have endless overlays. and and we talked about Daniel and this area, the plains of Moab, Mount Nebo, the mining lands of Ophir, the lands of Solomon, where he got all his gold, Salt Lake City, the Mecca of Galilee, and the Dead Sea. And then we're going to finish up going over some articles really quick about the Danites of Utah and why that's so important. Because the Danites and the Phoenicians, huge overlays here with the Indians and the Mormons. There were 2 groups of Mormons. We're going to talk about that really quick here. Hope everyone's enjoying themselves. Yeah, I didn't get to cover everything as usual. But yeah, we're running a little late here. So I'll just breeze through these. Expect throughout the week that I'll do a few more little shorts, break these articles up, get some more stuff out that I wasn't able to fit into this article. Okay, it's not showing that. Share screen with images is really, really annoying. I apologize. Paganism in California. Now, I read this article when I did the California episode, but why is this important? We're going to jump down to the bottom. Nearly every nation on the face of the globe has helped to people the United States. This is true. That's because the United States and America people the world. All of the races of the world, from a archaeological standpoint, come from here. The oldest representations of many of the races come from the Americas, South, Mexico, North. And we have now clearly all the professed religions in the world, from Christianity to the bastard Mohammedans, as in Utah. Okay. This is a really old article. It's from the 1850s. It seems silly. Why would I share that? But it's not silly, because through these few more here that I'm going to present, it's a trend that disappeared and no one talked about. Tuesday evening, a white Mormon named Caldwell attacked an Aztec of the Lost Tribes of Israel at Sevier River. Okay, Sevier River is the forest, the river running through the forest where they found those stone pipes running underground, and where the big bridges, they called natural bridges, but I believe were created by the hands of man, surrounded by all those prehistoric cities. This is in that same area. Tuesday evening, a white Mormon named Cadwell attacked an Aztec of the Lost Tribe of Israel at Sevier River Bridge about undue intimacy with the plaintiff's daughter. Okay, this is 1850s. Okay, they're having an argument, but look at the way they're describing each other. Okay, you don't find this language anywhere else. Okay, this was returned by the Lamanite with a brave revolver and pistol. The assailant missed while the defendant got in 2 shots. Okay, so seems again without context why are you sharing this, but as we go further along, it's going to become more evident that what was going on in the 1840s and 50s in the American Southwest is not what we were told, and that the groups of people were not what we were told. The Mormons arming Ogden, May 1st. A circular ordering the brethren to convene at the ward schoolhouses for drill was privately circulated through Salt Lake on Friday. Drilling and arming continue throughout the territory of Utah. 50 Danites are said to have been rolled since Brigham Young's return. Meanwhile, Brigham declared Mormonism is peace. Now, what's the reference that I'm making there? Well, the Danites. Okay, the Mormons are arming themselves against the U.S. government, and they're hiring Danites. Now, why don't we hear anything about these Danites in the 1850s? Who are these Danites from Utah? Well, here's a quote from Brigham Young. On page 148 of the Deseret News, Volume 7, this is from the 1850s. President Brigham Young says, if men come here to Utah and do not behave themselves. Now, remember, the Mormons were being killed all over America. They were being killed in Missouri. They were being killed in Illinois. They were being killed in Florida, murdered in the streets. Joseph Smith was murdered. If men come here and do not behave themselves, they will not only find the Danites, whom they talk so much about, biting the horses' heels, but the scoundrels will find something biting their heels. In my plain remarks, I merely call things by their right names. With the concluding sentence attached, this paragraph cannot be constructed ironically, that a secret band or junto once existed among the Mormons. Yes, the secret band of the Mormons is the Danites. Okay, this is incredibly important. Yes, it was Joseph Smith's Mormon militia. Yes, and they called themselves the Danites. The secret militia was called the Danites. Okay, incredibly important. But think of all of what we were talking about. What was Salt Lake to these people? Okay, the language. The Book of Mormon is descended from a Micmac Egyptian golden tablet from a mound of giants found in New York. Okay, that led them to the Mecca, the holy promised land, the land of Ophir, the land of Solomon, which is Utah, the city on the Jordan River between the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee, where Moses led his people across the Red Sea and where he was buried in Moab. Okay? You feeling what I'm putting together here, you guys? But truth denies its existence now. Yes, it was a secret band. That's why this quote is incredible. This was Deseret News. This was posted in their own Mormon literature, but you don't find anything about it. He's saying to you in his own words, and this is the only time I've ever found that he actually admitted to it. If you come here and try to hurt our people, you will only find the Danites, and they will run you out of town. The scoundrels will find something biting their heels. But truth denies its existence now. They may have changed their name for the purpose of executing more successfully the duties enjoined on them. Yes, everything went underground. Remember, the U.S. government was killing the Mormons. Okay. The U.S. government was killing the Mormons. What pushed the Mormons west? Many things. Many things that the people don't talk about to get today. The wagon trains leading to the west they were burned alive. They were thousands of people were killed on these wagon trains. Okay, we got a few more of these to get through. We're almost at the end. Thanks for sticking with me, you guys. Wanted to finish with this because this is really important stuff. The Washington correspondent of the Boston Post, again, this is from 1850s. The talk about removing the army from Kansas before her admission as a state is perfectly futile because in the present condition of things, there is as much danger of rapine, murder, and destruction of property from the branch of the Mormon Danites headed by Jim Lane in Kansas as from those headed by Brigham Young at Salt Lake. Kansas was another area where they had kind of a last bastion, and they were being murdered. And Kansas was being admitted into the U.S. government, and that was the end for the Mormons. They knew it. They knew that they had to fight with all their might, or they were all going to be killed. So the two leaders are no doubt in concert. And the moment the troops should leave Kansas for Utah, Lane's Danites would unquestionably begin a civil war there, which would be far worse in its effects than anything that would happen at Salt Lake. Exactly. This is an important overlay because this relates directly to what was going on during the Civil War. Okay, this was an internal war, and there's no coincidence here between the language that I've laid out for you. That the secret Mormon militia, Mormon, were the ancient Danites. And what is ancient? Okay, these people were returning to their Mecca, where they dug out their old city, the land of Ophir, the Temple of Solomon, the Mecca, the land between the Sea of Galilee, and the power of that from the. Okay, we got one more and then we'll finish. This one's good. Hope you're enjoying this, guys. Thanks again for being here. A body of seceders from the Mormons who have fled from the power of the Danites and from the territory of Utah have arrived at the Mormon settlements on the North Fork of the Platte River and brought the intelligence that hostile movements among the Mormons of Utah against the United States troops have already begun. There are reports that a large force under Brigham Young and Heber C. Kimball was preparing to leave Salt Lake City for a campaign in the mountains eastward, with the avowed object of falling upon the United States troops as if they should have reached that neighborhood and cutting them off before they now have had opportunities to entrench themselves or received any reinforcements. It was generally supposed that in secret conclave the leaders had determined to make the attack at the pass of Bear River Cutoff near the steeple rocks, and that if they should succeed in finding the troops in the region, they would be able to exterminate them. Immense military preparations are known to have been making for many months, and nearly the whole population have been under drill, so that they are considered good and well disciplined soldiers. They expect to be able to destroy the force dispatched this fall, and with the reinforcements which will reach them in the spring from the states and from other countries, to resist successfully any force that can possibly be sent against them and establish an independent government. How much of this statement is an exaggeration remains to be seen. These bastard Mohammedan Mormons, Jewish Sephardic Mormons, Danites, Danite militia fighting the U.S. government that's moving west. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed the episode and you kind of get kind of a better idea of what was going on in the 1800s here in the West. It was a war against not only Muslim and Jew, but Phoenician and Danite, and the Mormon teachings and all these things. Everything's gone underground. Like that article said, they had to bury all of this. But if you're going to come out here and try to mess with my people, as Brigham Young said, you're going to find the Danites and we're going to run your ass out of town. So, yeah, 170 people. Hope you enjoyed the show. If you have questions, don't hesitate to leave a comment. Look forward to me doing a few more shorts and a little bit of stuff that I didn't get in here, maybe with a little more of my own opinion on it. And yeah, also look forward to the poll I'll be posting today between Colorado and Nevada. I kind of already know where it's going, but I'm still going to do it. I want people to get their votes in, and then for the rest of the week, after I get some of these short clips done, I'll be starting my posts on whatever state wins. So yeah, thanks for being here, everybody. And again, love you all. I wouldn't do this without your continued support. It means everything. So yeah, have a wonderful Tuesday, everybody. Thanks again. Bye.